What is the game plan? The growing tensions around Iran are not only shaking the Middle East, but also raising serious concerns in Beijing. As conflicts intensify and geopolitical risks grow, China finds itself watching the situation carefully, trying to understand how this conflict could affect its long-term ambitions. For China, stability in the Middle East has always been extremely important. The region supplies a large portion of the energy that powers the Chinese economy. Oil shipments traveling through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz are critical to China's industries, transportation networks, and manufacturing sector. If a wider conflict involving Iran were to disrupt these routes, the consequences could ripple across the global economy. Oil prices could surge, supply chains could become unstable, and countries heavily dependent on energy imports, including China, would face serious challenges. China is currently the world's largest importer of crude oil, and a significant share of that oil comes from the Middle East. Iran, despite sanctions and political tensions with the West, has remained an important energy partner for Beijing. Much of Iran's oil exports have quietly flowed toward Chinese markets over the past decade. Because of this relationship, China has invested heavily in maintaining diplomatic ties with Tehran. In 2021, the two countries signed a long-term strategic cooperation agreement that outlined plans for large Chinese investments in Iranian infrastructure, transportation, and energy sectors. However, the risk of escalating conflict threatens to complicate these plans. War introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is the enemy of long-term economic projects. Chinese companies prefer stability when building pipelines, ports, railways, and trade corridors. Another key concern for Beijing is the potential disruption to the Belt and Road Initiative, China's massive global infrastructure project designed to connect Asia, Europe, and Africa through trade routes and logistics networks. Iran plays a strategic geographic role in this initiative, acting as a bridge between Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. If instability spreads across the region, several planned corridors could face delays or security risks. Transport routes, rail networks, and shipping lanes could become vulnerable to military escalation or sanctions. At the same time, China must carefully balance its diplomatic position. Beijing has attempted to present itself as a neutral power that encourages dialogue and negotiations rather than military confrontation. Unlike some Western countries, China rarely intervenes directly in foreign conflicts. Instead, it focuses on economic engagement and long-term partnerships. This strategy allows Beijing to maintain relationships with multiple sides in complex geopolitical disputes. But the Iran situation presents a complicated test. On one side, China values its partnership with Iran. On the other, it must maintain stable relations with Gulf countries, many of which are also key energy suppliers and important economic partners. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other Gulf states play major roles in China's energy security and investment strategy. A war in the region could force China into a difficult diplomatic position where balancing these relationships becomes increasingly complicated. Another factor is the global perception of China's rising influence. As China seeks a larger role in international politics, crises like the Iran conflict challenge Beijing to demonstrate whether it can act as a stabilizing force on the global stage. Some analysts believe China could attempt to increase its diplomatic presence by promoting negotiations or supporting ceasefire efforts. Others argue that Beijing will likely continue its cautious approach, avoiding direct involvement while protecting its economic interests. Meanwhile, global markets are watching closely. Investors, governments, and energy companies all understand that the Middle East remains one of the most sensitive regions in global geopolitics. Even small escalations can trigger major reactions in financial markets and energy prices. For China, whose economy relies heavily on stable global trade, prolonged instability is a serious concern. The future of the conflict remains uncertain. If tensions escalate into a broader regional war, the impact would be felt far beyond the Middle East. Energy markets, international trade, and geopolitical alliances could all shift dramatically. China's leadership is therefore carefully analyzing every development, weighing risks and opportunities while trying to protect the country's long-term strategic goals. In the end, the question remains, what is the real game plan? Is China preparing to take a more active diplomatic role, or will it continue to observe from the sidelines while focusing on economic stability? One thing is clear. The outcome of tensions surrounding Iran could influence not only the future of the Middle East, but also the direction of global power politics in the years ahead.